Alright, so this week has been a busy one for Valve news, and honestly, a lot of it connects together in ways that make it pretty interesting to look at all at once, so let's get into it. First up, Proton 11 dropped into beta this week, and while there's a lot going on in this update, anti-sync, Wine 11 rebase, compatibility improvements for a lot of games, the part that I think matters the most long term is the official ARM64 build. So here's the quick version. Most PC games are built for x86, which is the architecture in your desktop CPU or your Steam Deck, or your gaming laptops or Intel or AMD. ARM is completely different. It's what's in your phone, your smart cameras, IoT devices, GPS systems, even your fridge, and increasingly also on these Android handhelds like the Odin 3. And ARM and x86, the two just don't understand each other natively. And Proton and Wine itself has been the compatibility layer that enables Windows to Linux translation. For years we've had Wine and Proton, which helps translate Windows into Linux, but we didn't have anything that translates x86 to ARM. And to bridge that gap, Valve has been funding a project called FEX, which stands for Fast x86 Emulation, which translates x86 instructions into ARM instructions in real time. And now with Proton 11, FEX is officially baked in together with Proton for the first time. Now, when Valve first unveiled the Steam Frame, I had a question I couldn't quite answer, and it had me worried. Proton already acts as a translation layer. It takes Windows games and makes them run on Linux. FEX is a second translation layer on top of that, taking x86 and converting it to ARM. So before you even play the game, it's going through two separate translation steps, and that seemed like it could be a real problem performance-wise, compatibility-wise, and just in general. But the fact that Valve has now officially bundled these two things together into a single compatibility layer gives me a lot more confidence. It's not two separate things bolted together, and yeah, we've already seen these two work separately with apps like GameHub or GameNative on these ARM devices, and performance is pretty good. I tested 100 games on the Odin 3 back in January, and that testing is due for another round as now more and more games run, and they run better than ever. So imagine how good they can run with both Proton 11 and FEX combined into a single thing. Now, I'm talking in simplified terms because I myself am not too tech savvy when it comes to Linux or these compatibility layers, but the results are speaking for themselves. And the reason all this matters for the Steam Frame specifically is, first of all, you can't put a full x86 chip into a comfortable VR headset. Those processors run hot, they're power hungry, and the battery life would be terrible, and that's why the Meta Quest, for example, which is the biggest standalone headset, runs on ARM. However, games on the Meta Quest 3 are Android based, and you're limited to buying them on the Meta Store. What Valve is trying to achieve with their FEX layer on their headset is to enable you to play your already existing Steam library standalone in VR, in 2D or even 3D for some games. Not just VR games, your normal PC games. And I think this alone makes the Steam Frame an amazing purchase from a value standpoint. On top of that, ARM chips are fundamentally more efficient. They're designed to do more with less power, which is exactly why they're in every phone and why devices like the Quest can run for hours on a smaller battery. For a headset that you're wearing on your face, that efficiency isn't just nice to have, it's basically a requirement. And honestly, it's becoming the same story for handhelds too. The x86 handhelds are just getting bigger and heavier. Some are even getting to the point where you question the term handheld. On the other hand, these ARM-based retro handhelds can get smaller and smaller while still keeping the same battery life and sometimes even the same performance. ARM runs cooler and it lasts longer on a charge. The trade-off has always been about compatibility, but that's exactly what FEX and Proton together are solving. So in a way, Proton 11 isn't just a software update, it's the thing that makes the next generation of Valve hardware actually viable. Now, as it currently stands, there is no ARM chip that is more powerful than what we currently have with x86, and if Valve is looking to release a successor to the Steam Deck in 2028, they might not go down the ARM route if they want to target a generational performance leap. Asus recently released a new laptop with the latest Qualcomm X2 Elite processor, and it's looking really good, so only time will tell. What I do know for sure is that Valve is looking to get more performance for the same or more battery life, and at the same or smaller form factor for a Steam Deck 2. Maybe ARM is going to enable that, maybe it won't, and maybe it will be used for a much smaller device like a Steam Deck Mini that targets great performance for less intensive games. Now, connecting directly to the first topic, If you own an ARM-based Android handheld, you don't have to wait for the Steam Fate to start poking at all of this. The ROCKNIX team announced this week that Steam is now officially supported in their firmware. Now, ROCKNIX is an immutable Linux distribution for handheld gaming devices. It focuses mainly on retro gaming emulation, but as of 2 days ago, it now supports a fairly long list of Qualcomm-based devices like the Odin 2 lineup, Retrowave Pocket 5 and 6, the Pocket Flip 2 and a handful of IO Neo Pocket models for this new Steam solution. Now, installation is apparently pretty straightforward, and I'll leave a link to their wiki page for instructions if you want to try it out for yourself. But it is worth being clear about what this is. This is not SteamOS. You're not getting TDP controls, no Mango HUD, no system level game mode. What you're getting is a Linux distribution with a Steam client that launches in big picture mode. You can browse your library and you can download games and you can run them through Proton. And there is a known bug right now where you can't access the Steam menu mid-game. You kind of have to exit out completely and restart, so you have to keep your expectations in check, but that's another way to play PC games on ARM. Now, the Odin 3 and Conquer Pocket Fit Elite aren't on the supported list yet. They both run the Snapdragon 8 Elite, and ROCKNIX says development is ongoing, so as soon as that's out, I'm gonna try it on my Odin 3. Now, for early adopters, this is pretty exciting. However, for most people, I would wait a bit until this gets a little bit more stable to a point where you end up playing more games instead of ending up tinkering more with games and not actually playing. And with the third topic, I want to tie this all together, and I think this is where things start to feel like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Now, SteamOS 3.8 has been bumped up from preview to beta in the last week, and the big deal with 3.8 is that it includes initial support for the Steam machine. Moving from preview to beta is pretty meaningful, and betas typically go through a 1 to 2 week cycle before hitting the stable branch, and I think that timing matters. You're gonna find out why in just a second. And then there's the Steam controller. So Brad Lynch, who's been a solid source for Valve and VR hardware leaks, posted this week that it looks like Valve has received its first large shipment of what's described as a wireless PC controller in the US. Now, earlier this week I was putting together a case for why the controller or even the whole of Steam hardware could drop imminently, and my reasoning went something like: there is a gap in the Steam weekly events right now, with the next one on the 20th. It's a tax return week in the US, so a lot of people have extra cash. On top of that, at the end of the fiscal year, a lot of people get bonuses from their employers. And now this, I think, is personally a stretch as a reason, but it's been floated around. And Valve has a large shipment of controllers sitting somewhere. And if you actually map out a realistic timeline with a pre-order window of a week or two, and factoring in how long it took the very first LCD decks to reach people, you're suddenly looking at some customers receiving their hardware all the way in June. And we're in mid-April now, so the window for release before the summer is getting pretty tight. And on top of that, SteamOS 3.8 entering beta and timing lining up with a potential stable release in a week or two, it all felt like it was converging and it was about to happen. But alas, as always, nothing happened. And as it turns out, Valve apparently does a Hawaii trip around mid-April every year, so maybe expecting any big announcements this particular week was already wishful thinking. What I do think though is that we're watching Valve put the final pieces of the puzzle. Proton 11 in beta, SteamOS 3.8 in beta, controller shipments confirmed. The logical read is that they probably want to see Proton 11 leave beta and SteamOS 3.8 hit stable before making any announcements about the Steam machine, Steam frame, or the controller. And even then, when Valve does say something, it will likely be an announcement of a pre-order date first and then the actual pre-order later, to give everyone enough time to check under the mattress and scrape together the funds. Because in the hardware market we're in right now, this is not gonna be cheap hardware. So that's it for the past week, and what I find interesting is how much of it connects, at least in my head. Maybe it's the copy room again. I wanna know what you think though, drop it in the comments. Are you more excited about the Steam controller, or is the Steam frame and the Steam machine what you're actually waiting for? And if you own an ARM handheld like an Odin 2 or Retrowave Pocket, anything like that, would you like to see actually try and get Steam running on my Odin 3? Or maybe you want to see me test out more games with Proton 11? Let me know in the comments what you want to see, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you hated it, let me know what I can do to improve, and if you're into Steam, Steam Deck and handhelds content, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.